The alarms screamed through Nexus Prime Station like dying animals. Red lights flashed in every corridor. 40,000 civilians from 12 different species ran through the halls in panic. Some cried. Some prayed to gods that lived in distant stars. All of them knew what the alarms meant. They had come. Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. His silver carapace gleamed under the ship's cold lights. His compound eyes, each one containing 1,000 smaller lenses, watched the space station floating before him like a fruit ready to be picked. Behind him, 200 warships waited in perfect formation, the largest fleet the Dominion had sent anywhere in 50 years. Had conquered 37 worlds in his career. He had broken species that thought themselves mighty. He had never lost a single battle. His mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his kind. "Open a channel to the station," he ordered. His communication officer obeyed. His voice boomed through every speaker on Nexus Prime. "Inhabitants of Nexus Prime, I am commander of the Dominion. You have 1 standard hour to surrender this station. Send out your leaders in chains. Open your docking bays. Offer no resistance." He paused. "If you do not comply, we will reduce this station to atoms. Every man, woman, and child aboard will die. You have 1 hour." The channel closed. Turned to his second in command, a younger named Al. "Prepare the Al," said. "I want 3,000 ready to board." 3,000. Al's antennae twitched with surprise. "Surely that is excessive, Commander. The station's defense force numbers only a few hundred, mostly private security." "I do not wish to wait," replied. "Overwhelming force ends battles quickly. Quick battles mean fewer complications." He turned back to the viewport. "Besides, I want the other species watching this sector to understand something. When the Dominion takes what it wants, there is no fighting back. There is only submission." Deep in the lower sections of Nexus Prime, far from the screaming civilians and the flashing alarms, a different kind of meeting was taking place. The room was small and gray. 42 humans sat or stood inside it, wearing armor that had seen better days. They were Terran Marines from the 7th Expeditionary Unit. They had come to Nexus Prime 3 weeks ago on what everyone called a milk run, a simple job protecting a human diplomat during trade negotiations. Easy work. Boring work. Nobody was bored anymore. Gunnery Sergeant stood at the front of the room. She was not a tall woman. She was not physically imposing. But when she spoke, every Marine listened. There was something in her eyes, something hard and cold and absolutely unbreakable. Burned scars ran across her neck, souvenirs from a battle on a moon whose name most people had forgotten. She had not forgotten. "Listen up," said. Her voice was calm. "You all heard the announcement. They are here with 200 ships. They want this station. They have given us 1 hour to surrender." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. "Station security is useless," continued. "The nearest Allied fleet is 3 days away. The station administrator is currently hiding under his desk and crying. In short, we are alone." Private First Class, the youngest Marine in the unit at 19 years old, raised her hand. "Sergeant, what are our orders?" Looked at her. Then she looked at all of them. These were her people, her family. She had trained with some of them for years. She had bled with them. She would die with them if necessary. "Our orders," she said slowly, "are to protect the civilians on this station. There are 40,000 of them. Men, women, children, beings who have never fired a weapon in their lives." She paused. "They will not treat them kindly. You all know their reputation." Everyone knew. They did not take prisoners, they took slaves. The lucky ones died quickly. "So here is what we are going to do," said. She pulled up a holographic map of the station. "We are going to make the pay for every corridor, every room, every inch of this station. We are going to buy time." "Time for what?" asked Corporal, a big man with a thick beard and sad eyes. "Time for the fleet to arrive. Time for the civilians to hide. Time for a miracle," smiled, but there was no humor in it. And if no miracle comes, we are going to make sure to remember this day forever. We are going to make them bleed so badly that they think twice before attacking humans again." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Sergeant First Class, a veteran who had served with for 15 years, stood up. "What do you need us to do?" he asked. Nodded. This was why she loved these people. No complaints, no despair, just the simple question, what needs to be done? "First, we evacuate the civilians to the hardened shelters in Section 12. Those shelters were built to survive meteor impacts. They will survive anything to throw at them." She pointed to locations on the map. "Second, we rig throughout the station. Every corridor that leads from the docking bays to the civilian areas becomes a kill zone. We use maintenance shafts, ventilation systems, and service tunnels to move around. We hit them and disappear before they can respond." "Guerrilla warfare," said, "inside a space station." "Exactly," looked at him. "They have never fought humans before. They have never fought anyone like us. They expect us to line up in neat formations and die honorably. That is what every other species has done." Her smile turned sharp. "We are going to teach them that humans do not fight fair. We fight to win." The hour passed quickly. The Marines worked with desperate efficiency. They moved civilians toward the shelters, speaking calmly to terrified families, carrying children who could not walk fast enough. They placed explosive charges at key points. They memorized every path, every shortcut, every hiding place. When the hour ended, Commander received no surrender. His mandibles clicked with annoyance. "They are foolish," he said. "Launch the boarding parties." Dozens of shuttles left the fleet, carrying 3,000 AL warriors toward Nexus Prime. The AL were bioengineered soldiers, 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating that could stop most weapons. They had claws that could tear through metal. They had been designed for one purpose: to kill. They had never failed. On Nexus Prime, the Marines took their positions. They checked their weapons. They said quiet prayers or whispered the names of loved ones they might never see again. Sergeant stood at the central command post they had established in a maintenance hub. From here, she could see camera feeds from across the station. She watched the shuttles approach. She watched the docking bays open as station security, following the administrator's final panicked orders, "Let the enemy in." "All units," she said into her comm, "weapons free, make them pay." The first AL warriors stepped onto Nexus Prime. They moved in perfect formation, weapons raised, confident in their superiority. They had done this 1,000 times before. They had no idea what was waiting for them. In a maintenance shaft above Corridor 7 Alpha, Corporal watched the first enemy squad pass beneath him. He counted 20 of them, big, armored, terrifying. He smiled and pressed the detonator. The explosion tore through the corridor. Before the smoke cleared, Marines opened fire from 3 different positions. The AL tried to respond, but their enemies were already gone, vanishing into the walls like ghosts. 20 AL died in less than 30 seconds. The battle for Nexus Prime had begun. Commander stared at the first casualty report. His mandibles froze. He read the numbers again, certain there was some mistake. 200 AL dead in the first hour. "This is not possible," he said. His second-in-command, Al, shifted uncomfortably. "The reports are confirmed, Commander. Our warriors are encountering unexpected resistance." "From whom?" demanded. "The station security forces are hiding. The civilians are running. Who is killing my soldiers?" "Humans, Commander. A small unit of Terran Marines. Our scouts estimate perhaps 40 or 50 of them." Turned sharply. 50 humans killed 200 AL in 1 hour. "Yes, Commander." For a long moment said nothing. He had studied humans before as he studied all potential enemies. They were a young species, barely a century into space travel. They were physically weak compared to most galactic races. They had no natural armor, no claws, no special abilities. On paper, they were nothing special. But something in the reports bothered him, something in the way his warriors were dying. "Show me the combat footage," he ordered. The screen lit up with recordings from Al helmet cameras, watched as a squad of his finest warriors moved through a corridor. Everything was quiet. Then fire came from everywhere at once, from above, from the sides, from behind panels that should have been solid walls. His warriors fell before they could even aim their weapons. And then, as quickly as it started, the firing stopped. The attackers vanished. The footage ended. The last Al in the squad had bled out on the floor, alone, not having seen a single enemy clearly. "They do not fight like soldiers," Al said quietly. "They fight like... I do not know what they fight like." Cowards growled. "They hide and strike from shadows. They have no honor." "Perhaps," Al replied, "but they are effective." His claws scraped against his command chair. He had built his career on crushing enemies with overwhelming force. He had never faced an enemy that refused to stand and be crushed. "Send 5,000 more troops," he ordered. "Fill every corridor with soldiers. They cannot hide if there is nowhere left to hide." On the station, the battle continued. Al was a young Al warrior on his first real combat mission. He had trained for years. He had dreamed of glory and honor. He had imagined himself standing over defeated enemies, earning medals and respect. He had not imagined this. His squad moved through Section 4, weapons raised, eyes scanning every shadow. There were supposed to be 20 of them. Now there were 12. The others had died in the last 2 hours, picked off one by enemies they never saw. "Stay together," his squad leader, a veteran named Al, ordered. "Watch the ceiling, watch the vents. They come from everywhere." Al's hearts were beating fast, both of them. He tried to control his breathing, tried to remember his training, but nothing in his training had prepared him for enemies who moved like spirits. A sound came from above, a small sound like something scraping against metal. "Contact," someone shouted. They all looked up. Nothing was there. But when Al looked back down, Al was gone. Simply gone. A vent cover lay open where he had been standing. From inside the vent came sounds of struggle, then a horrible gurgling noise, then silence. "Al," one of the warriors shouted. He rushed toward the vent. "No, wait," Al started. Too late. The warrior stuck his head into the vent. There was a flash of light, a wet sound, and the warrior fell backward with a knife buried in his throat. A human hand reached out, pulled the knife free, and vanished back into the darkness. The remaining Al opened fire into the vent, screaming, spraying ammunition wildly. When they stopped, breathing hard, Al moved forward carefully. He looked into the vent. Empty, the human was already gone. For the first time in his life, Al understood fear. In another part of the station, Sergeant crouched in a service tunnel with 3 other Marines. They were covered in grime and sweat. They had not slept in 6 hours. They had killed dozens of enemies each. "How's your ammunition?" she asked Private, a quiet man who rarely spoke more than necessary. "Running low," replied. "Maybe 2 more engagements." Nodded. This was the problem with guerrilla warfare. It worked beautifully until you ran out of bullets. Her comm crackled. "Sergeant, they're pushing hard through sections 6 and 7. I've got a lot of them moving toward the civilian shelters." "Fall back to the secondary positions," ordered. "Make them fight for every step. Don't let them get close to those shelters." "Understood, out." Leaned back against the tunnel wall. 42 Marines against thousands. The math was not in their favor. It had never been in their favor. But every hour they held was another hour the civilians stayed safe. Every hour was another hour closer to possible rescue. If rescue was coming at all. Back on the flagship, Commander received a strange request. The station's artificial intelligence wanted to establish communication. "Why would a machine want to talk to us?" Al asked. "Perhaps it wishes to surrender on behalf of the station," said. Open the channel. The AI's voice was calm and polite. Commander, I am Arya, the administrative intelligence of Nexus Prime. I have been observing your battle with the Terran Marines. I believe there is some contextual information you are lacking. Speak, commanded. You seem confused by human combat tactics. Perhaps some historical context would help you understand the species you are fighting. The main screen lit up. Images began to play. At first did not understand what he was seeing. Then slowly the horror dawned on him. He was watching humans fight other humans. He saw massive battles with millions of soldiers. He saw cities burning. He saw weapons that split atoms and turned everything to fire. He saw trenches filled with dead bodies. He saw machines of war that rolled across landscapes, crushing everything beneath them. These images span approximately 10,000 years of human history, Arya explained calmly. Humans have been fighting each other since before they developed writing. They have created increasingly efficient methods of killing their own kind. They have survived plagues, famines, and wars that killed hundreds of millions. His compound eyes watched images of mushroom clouds rising over cities. They did that to themselves, he whispered. Yes, Commander, and they survived, they rebuilt, they continued. Arya paused. The Dominion has never lost a war because you have never faced an enemy that truly understood warfare. Humans understand warfare the way fish understand water. They were born in it. They were shaped by it. The screen showed more images. Soldiers laughing around campfires. Wounded humans dragging themselves forward to continue fighting. A single human standing against an army, refusing to retreat. The Marines on this station are not elite soldiers by human standards, Arya continued. They are considered average, competent but average. If you wish, I can show you footage of what humans consider their elite forces. No, said quickly, that will not be necessary. He stood in silence for a long time after the AI ended the transmission. Around him, his officers waited nervously. Commander, Al finally asked, what are your orders? His mandibles clicked slowly. He had conquered species with great technology. He had conquered species with powerful natural abilities. He had never conquered a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to kill. But he was commander. He had never lost. He would not lose now. Send everyone, he said quietly. Every soldier we have. I want that station taken in the next 12 hours. Commander, our casualties are already. I do not care about casualties, roared. We have 30,000 soldiers, they have 50, this ends now. As more troops flooded into Nexus Prime, the Marines fell back to their secondary positions. They were tired. They were running low on supplies, but they were still fighting. In a dark corridor, found herself alone, separated from her squad during a firefight, lost in the maze of the station. She had half a magazine left and a combat knife. Somewhere nearby, she could hear Al searching for her. She did not panic. She did not give up. She found a good position, a place where the shadows were deep and the enemy would have to come at her one at a time. Then she waited. The first Al that found her died before it even knew she was there. The station had become a place of nightmares. 18 hours had passed since the first soldier set foot on Nexus Prime. In that time, the corridors had transformed. Lights flickered or died completely, leaving sections in total darkness. Smoke from explosions and fires hung in the air like fog. Bodies lay where they had fallen because nobody had time to move them. And through it all, the humans kept fighting. Al pressed himself against a wall, his breathing ragged. He was the last survivor of his original squad. Everyone else was dead. Some had died quickly in explosions or firefights. Others had died slowly, dragged into darkness by hands they never saw. Around him, other Al warriors moved through the corridor. They were not the proud, confident soldiers who had boarded the station 18 hours ago. Their movements were jerky and nervous. They jumped at shadows. They fired at sounds that turned out to be nothing. The humans had done something to the station's speaker system. At random times, strange sounds would blast through the corridors. Sometimes it was music, human music, with pounding rhythms and screaming voices. Sometimes it was just noise, designed to confuse and terrify. Sometimes it was laughter. The laughter was the worst. "Keep moving," ordered Captain, who had taken command after the previous 3 officers died. "The human positions are just ahead. One more push and we break through." Nobody believed him anymore. They had heard that same promise a dozen times. Each one more push resulted in more bodies and no progress. But they moved forward anyway. They had no other choice. In the hydroponic gardens of Section 9, Private First Class had been fighting alone for 6 hours. The gardens were a maze of growing tanks, artificial trees, and winding paths meant to give the station's residents a taste of nature. Now they were a hunting ground, had made them her territory. She had run out of ammunition 4 hours ago. Since then, she had relied on her knife, improvised traps, and the absolute certainty that she would not die today. 11 Al had entered the gardens looking for her. None had left. She crouched behind a large, growing tank, listening. Her body was covered in cuts and bruises. Her left arm was burned where a near miss from an energy weapon had grazed her. She had not eaten in 12 hours. None of that mattered. Footsteps approached. Heavy, armored footsteps. Al was searching for her, moving slowly through the artificial forest. Smiled. She had prepared for this. A wire stretched across the path at ankle height. When the owl tripped, he fell forward into a pit she had dug and covered with leaves. At the bottom of the pit were sharpened stakes made from broken equipment. The owl screamed as he fell. The screaming stopped when dropped down after him, knife in hand. When she climbed back out, she was carrying his weapon, fully charged. "Now we're even," she whispered to no one. On the flagship, Commander was losing control. Not of the battle, though that was going poorly. He was losing control of his soldiers. Reports were coming in that made his blood run cold. Al warriors were refusing to advance. These were soldiers bred for combat, engineered to feel no fear, and they were refusing orders. They spoke of demons in the dark. They spoke of enemies that could not be killed. They spoke of corridors that ate soldiers and never gave them back. "This is unacceptable," growled. "Execute anyone who refuses to fight." "Commander," Al said carefully, "we have already executed 17 soldiers. It is not helping. The fear is spreading faster than we can contain it." "Fear? Al do not feel fear." "They did not used to feel fear," Al corrected. "They learned." Slammed his clawed fist against the command console. Nearly 2,000 of his soldiers were dead. 2,000, against less than 50 humans. His career was in ruins. His reputation was destroyed. Even if he took the station now, he would return home in disgrace. "There must be something we are missing," he said. "Some technology, some hidden weapon. How are they doing this?" Al pulled up analysis data. "We have examined all available evidence, Commander. The humans are using standard weaponry, standard tactics. They are simply better at this than anyone expected." "Impossible. No species is this good at combat." "One species is," Al said quietly. "The species that spent its entire history killing itself." Back on the station, Sergeant held a meeting in their makeshift command post. The room was smaller now. 23 Marines remained. The others had fallen over the course of the long night. Looked at each face. Corporal, his beard now matted with blood and sweat. Private, who had spoken more words in the last 18 hours than in the previous year. Sergeant, whose left hand was bandaged where a owl claw had nearly taken it off. Private, who had somehow found her way back from the gardens carrying 3 enemy weapons and a look in her eyes that recognized from her own mirror. They were exhausted, they were wounded, they were running out of everything. They were still here. Status report said. Ammunition is critical, reported. We've been scavenging enemy weapons, but they're not compatible with our targeting systems. Accuracy is poor. Medical supplies are almost gone, added the squad medic, a woman named Tors. I've got enough to patch up maybe 2 more serious wounds. Food and water are holding, said. Not that anyone has time to eat. Nodded, she had known it would come to this. The math had never been in their favor. The only question was how long they could hold. What about the civilians? She asked. Still secure in the shelters, reported. They haven't gotten close. Every time they try to push toward Section 12, we hit them from the sides. They're learning to stay away from that area. Small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. 40,000 people were still alive because of what the Marines had done. How long until the fleet arrives? Asked. Checked her comm. The message from command had come 3 hours ago. 36 more hours, maybe less if they push their engines. Silence filled the room. 36 hours, an eternity. None of them said what they were all thinking. They would not last 36 hours. So we keep fighting, said finally. What else is there? There is something else, said slowly. She had been thinking about this for hours. They expect us to hide, to keep running, to keep defending. That's what guerrilla warfare is, pointed out. True, but they're adapting. They're flooding corridors with soldiers, making it harder to ambush them. They're learning our patterns, smiled that cold smile of hers. So we need to do something they will never expect. Which is? Attack, not an ambush. A direct assault on their command post inside the station. The room went quiet again. This time, the silence had a different quality. That's insane, Tors said. Yes, agreed. We'll be outnumbered 100 to 1. At least. Most of us will die. Probably. Leaned forward. What's the tactical advantage? Their command post coordinates all their forces on the station. If we take it out, they lose communication and coordination. Their soldiers will be scattered, confused. It will buy time. Paused. And it will send a message. What message? Asked. Looked at the young private, at all of them, her Marines, her family. That we're not trapped in here with them, she said quietly. They're trapped in here with us. Laughed. It was a harsh sound without much humor but real. Well, he said, I always wanted to do something memorable. One by one, the other Marines nodded. They checked their weapons. They said quiet goodbyes to each other, not sad goodbyes, but the kind of goodbye soldiers give before a battle they might not survive. Then they moved out. 15 Marines against a command post, defended by 300 soldiers. The attack came from 3 directions at once. It was fast, brutal, and completely unexpected. They had set up their command post in the station's main cargo bay, believing themselves safe behind walls of soldiers and heavy weapons. They were wrong. Led the main assault. Beside her, carried the heaviest weapon they had left, a captured AL plasma cannon. They burst through the cargo bay doors firing, not seeking cover, not trying to hide. The commander inside had exactly 3 seconds to feel surprised before a bullet found his head. The battle lasted 12 minutes. 12 minutes of close-quarters combat, of screaming and dying and refusing to give up. When it was over, the command post was destroyed. 200 soldiers lay dead. 8 Marines had fallen. Looked at the survivors. 7 Marines, including herself, 7 out of 42. Fall back to the civilian shelters, she ordered. We make our last stand there. As they retreated through smoke-filled corridors, carrying their wounded, the remaining Marines knew the truth. The end was coming, but it was not here yet. The destruction of the command post sent waves through the forces. For 3 hours, their soldiers wandered the station without coordination, without orders, without purpose. They fired at shadows. They fired at each other. They huddled in defensive positions and waited for enemies that did not come. On the flagship, Commander received news of the command post's destruction in silence. His officers watched him nervously, waiting for an explosion of rage. It did not come. Something worse came instead. Simply stood there staring at nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. How many humans attacked the command post? 15, Commander, based on survivor reports. 15 humans killed 300 of our soldiers and destroyed our command structure. Yes, Commander. His mandibles clicked slowly. And how many humans remain? We believe 7, Commander. Perhaps a few more we have not accounted for. 7 humans had held off an army for nearly 24 hours. 7 humans had killed thousands of his soldiers. 7 humans were still alive. Bring everyone back to the ships, ordered. Blinked in surprise, Commander. We will bombard the station from orbit, destroy it completely. The mission parameters allow for this if ground forces fail. But Commander, there are 40,000 civilians aboard. The other galactic powers will. I do not care what they will do, snarled, his rage finally breaking through. I will not send more soldiers into that death trap. I will not lose another warrior to those monsters. The bridge fell silent. Officers exchanged glances. They had never heard a commander call an enemy monsters. Commander, Al said carefully, the High Council will want to know why we bombarded a civilian station. They will ask why we could not defeat 7 humans with 30,000 soldiers. Froze, he understood what Al was saying. If he destroyed the station, he would be admitting defeat. His career would end in disgrace. His family would be shamed. His name would become a joke, the commander who could not defeat 7 humans. What do you suggest? He asked through clenched mandibles. One final assault, Commander. Commit everything we have left. 8,000 soldiers, heavy weapons, armored frames. They cannot have much ammunition left. They cannot have much strength left. Overwhelm them completely. Considered this. It was risky. It would mean more casualties, but if it worked, he could claim victory. He could write the history of this battle however he wanted. Do it, he said, but I want a surrender demand sent first. Let the humans know what they face. Give them one chance to submit. And if they refuse, then we crush them, whatever the cost. In the civilian shelter complex, the surviving Marines had gathered for what they all knew would be the final battle. 23 of them remained. Some had reunited with the main group during the chaos after the command post attack. Others had appeared from corners of the station where they had been fighting alone for hours. They looked terrible, wounded, exhausted, covered in blood both human and alien. Their armor was cracked and burned. Their weapons were held together with tape and determination. But they were still standing. Sergeant looked at them with something close to love. These people had done the impossible. They had held the line when holding the line was insane. They had fought an army and made the army bleed. Whatever happened next, she was proud of them. Listen up, she said. They are regrouping. We intercepted their communications. They're preparing one final push. 8,000 soldiers, everything they have. Nobody flinched. They were beyond flinching. We've moved all the civilians to the deepest part of the shelter complex. Whatever happens, they should be safe. The shelters can survive almost anything. What about us? Private asked. Met her eyes. We hold this position. We make them fight for every step. We buy as much time as we can. For what? Torres asked. The fleet is still 30 hours away. Maybe less, said. Maybe they found a way to move faster. Maybe a miracle happens. She paused. Or maybe we just die knowing we did everything we could. That 40,000 people are alive because we were here. Laughed a tired but genuine sound. You know what? I'm okay with that. Never thought I'd die saving aliens, but it's a good death. Better than dying in bed, agreed. They began preparing their positions. They had very little ammunition left, but they had barricades, and the knowledge of every path and tunnel in the area. They would make the work for this victory. Then the communication system crackled. "Human soldiers of Nexus Prime," Commander's voice boomed through the speakers. "This is your final warning. Surrender now and your lives will be spared. You will be treated as prisoners of war. This is more mercy than you deserve." The Marines looked at each other. "He wants an answer," said. "Walk to the nearest communication panel." She thought for a moment, then keyed her response. "I've got a counteroffer," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. She transmitted a single image through the system, the symbol of the Terran Marine Corps. "Come and take us." She cut the channel. "That was dramatic," observed. "Sometimes drama is all you have left," replied. The assault came 20 minutes later. They came in waves, hundreds of soldiers pouring down every corridor that led to the civilian shelters. They came with heavy weapons and armored frames and complete willingness to accept casualties. The Marines met them with everything they had. The first wave hit the outer barricades. The Marines opened fire, precise and disciplined, making every shot count. Al fell in rows, but more kept coming, climbing over the bodies of their fallen comrades. "Fall back to position 2, ordered. They moved, covering each other, leaving traps behind them. When they reached position 1, hidden charges detonated, taking dozens more with them. The second wave hit position 2. The fighting grew closer, more desperate. Took a hit to his shoulder but kept firing with his other hand. Threw his empty rifle at a charging Al and pulled his knife, stabbing the warrior in the eye before anyone could stop him. Position 3, move. More falling back, more fighting, more dying. Torres went down, hit by 3 shots at once. She died with her fingers still pulling the trigger. At position 3, the Marines made their stand. There was nowhere else to fall back to. Behind them was only the shelter door and 40,000 civilians. Looked at her remaining soldiers, 15 Marines against thousands. "It's been an honor," she said. "The honor was ours," replied. The charged. The fighting was brutal and close. There was no more ammunition for most of the Marines. They fought with knives, with fists, with broken rifle stocks. Killed 4 Al with her bare hands before a 5th knocked her down. Stood over her body, fighting off 3 attackers at once. Lost track of time. Everything became a blur of violence and desperation. She saw Marines fall. She saw fall. She felt pain in a dozen places but could not tell where she was wounded. Then, impossibly, the stopped. The surviving Al pulled back, leaving the Marines standing in a pile of bodies. Could not understand why. Were they regrouping for another push? Were they? A new voice crackled through every speaker on the station. It was calm, professional, and speaking in perfect. "Dominion forces, this is Admiral Way of the Terran Third Fleet. You have exactly 60 seconds to begin evacuation of Nexus Prime before we open fire." Felt her legs go weak. It was not possible. The fleet was 30 hours away. But when she looked at the tactical screens that still functioned, she saw it. 47 warships had appeared in space around the station. 3 dreadnoughts, the largest ships humanity had ever built, hung like mountains above the fleet. "They came," whispered. She was bleeding from a dozen wounds but smiling. They actually came. On the flagship, Commander stared at his tactical display. His fleet was surrounded, outmaneuvered. The Terran ships had appeared from nowhere, dropping out of faster-than-light travel directly on top of his position, a maneuver so dangerous that most species would never attempt it. "How?" he whispered. "They should not be here for 30 hours. "Admiral is hailing us, Commander," a communications officer reported. Said nothing. "Commander, your orders." Looked at the tactical display one more time. At the Terran warships. At the station where 7 humans, no, fewer now, surely fewer, had held off his entire army. He thought about his career, his reputation, his pride. Then he thought about his soldiers still dying on that station, dying for nothing, now that the battle was already lost. "Signal our surrender," he said quietly. "Commander." "I said surrender," roared. "Pull back all ground forces. We are leaving this place." Back on Nexus Prime, the troops received the withdrawal order. They stopped fighting. They turned and began walking toward the docking bays. The Marines watched them go, too tired to speak, too stunned to celebrate. Counted her people, 7 Marines left standing. The smoke from the final battle hung in the air around them. They stood in silence as the sound of retreating footsteps faded into the distance. It was over. They had won. The soldiers retreated through the corridors of Nexus Prime in silence. There was no pride in their steps, no defiance in their eyes. They had come to this station as conquerors, certain of their victory. They left as something else entirely. They had to walk past the evidence of their failure, past the barricades the humans had built, past the scorch marks from 100 ambushes, past the places where their comrades had died, sometimes alone, sometimes in groups, always at the hands of enemies they could barely see. The corridors were still filled with smoke from the final battle. It hung in the air like a gray fog, making it hard to see more than a few meters ahead. They walked through it with their heads down, wanting only to reach their shuttles and leave this nightmare behind. Then they reached the last corridor before the docking bay, and they stopped. Figures were emerging from the smoke ahead. For one terrifying moment, the thought it was another attack. Some of them raised their weapons, others prepared to run. Then they saw clearly what was walking toward them. Humans, the surviving Marines. They emerged from the smoke one by one, walking slowly toward the retreating army. Sergeant walked at the front. Her armor was cracked in a dozen places. Blood ran down her left arm from a wound she had not bothered to bandage. Her face was expressionless, neither triumphant nor angry, just calm. Behind her came the others. Corporal limping badly, one arm hanging useless at his side. Private supported by another Marine because he could barely stand. Private, her eyes bright with exhaustion and something that might have been fever. The rest, all wounded, all exhausted, all still standing. 23 humans. That was all that remained of the 42 who had stood against an army. The soldiers parted to let them pass. None of them spoke. None of them could think of anything to say. They simply watched as the impossible creatures who had destroyed their army walked through their ranks like ghosts. Al stood near the back of the retreating force. He watched the humans pass with something close to awe. One of them, the young female, the one who had hunted his people through the gardens, met his eyes as she walked by. She was smaller than him, softer. She had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons at all, and yet she had killed more warriors than he had ever seen in one place. She nodded at him, a small gesture almost respectful, as if acknowledging that he, too, had survived the long night. Al found himself nodding back. Then the Marines were past, and they continued their retreat, and the Battle of Nexus Prime was truly over. Commander requested a meeting with Sergeant before his fleet departed. It took place in a neutral area of the station, with armed guards on both sides. Neither side trusted the other anymore. Had never spoken to a human before. He studied carefully. She was small by almost any species standards. Her body showed signs of age and hard use. She stood before him with the easy confidence of someone who no longer feared anything. "I must know," said. "How did you do it?" Looked at him. "Do what?" "Hold this station. Defeat my army. You were 42 against tens of thousands. By every calculation, you should have been destroyed in the first hour." Considered the question. She thought about the 18 hours of fighting, the friends she had lost, the impossible odds they had faced. "We're stubborn," she said finally, "that's all." "That is not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." Paused. Your people have been conquering the galaxy for 600 years. You've beaten every species you ever faced. You've never lost a war." "That is true," said. There was no pride in his voice, only exhaustion. "Humans spent most of our history fighting each other. We had wars that lasted 100 years. We had wars that killed half our population. We dropped nuclear weapons on our own cities." Met his compound eyes directly. "We've been practicing for a long time, Commander, and the main thing we learned is this: we don't give up. Ever. No matter how bad it gets. We just keep fighting until we win or we die." Was silent for a long moment. "And the fleet, how did they arrive so quickly?" "Admiral pushed her ships past their rated speed, burned out half their engines getting here. Some of those ships will never fly again," smiled slightly. "She heard 42 Marines were holding the line. She wasn't going to let us down." "You risked destroying your own ships to save 42 soldiers." "To save 42 Marines," corrected. "That's what we do." Understood then, truly understood, why they had lost. It was not about numbers or weapons or tactics. It was about something deeper, something his species had never needed to develop because they had always been the strongest. Humans had learned to fight against impossible odds, because impossible odds were all they had ever known. "Your people are dangerous," he said quietly. "We can be," agreed. "We can also be good friends, your choice." 1 year later, a diplomatic mission arrived on Earth. It was the first time any had set foot on the human. The diplomats were nervous. Their guards were terrified. The Battle of Nexus Prime had changed everything. The Dominion, shaken by their defeat, had chosen negotiation over continued war. It was a new experience for them. Al came as part of the ambassador's security detail. He was a different warrior now than he had been a year ago. The nightmares had faded. The fear had transformed into something else. Respect, perhaps. Curiosity, definitely. He asked permission to visit a human museum. His superiors granted it, hoping that understanding humans better would help future negotiations. The museum was filled with human history. Al walked through halls of ancient weapons, old photographs, preserved artifacts. Humans had recorded everything about their past, including the terrible parts. They seemed to have no shame about their violent history. If anything, they seemed proud of what they had survived. He stopped in front of one painting. It showed a small group of human warriors standing in a narrow pass between mountains. They were surrounded by an army so large it covered the plain behind them. The warriors were clearly doomed. They stood their ground anyway. Al read the information beside the painting. The battle it depicted had happened thousands of years ago. 300 human warriors had held off an army of hundreds of thousands. They had all died, but their resistance had given their people time to prepare for the invasion. "That's one of our most famous stories," a voice said beside him. Al turned. A human female stood there, a museum guide based on her uniform. She was smiling in the way humans did when they were being friendly. 300 against 1,000,000, she continued. They knew they were going to die. They fought anyway. Al's mandibles clicked softly. "It seems this is a pattern with your species." The guide laughed. "We're stubborn like that, always have been." Al looked at the painting again. He thought about smoke-filled corridors. He thought about humans who refused to die. He thought about the look in Sergeant's eyes when she walked through the defeated army. "I met some of your Marines last year," he said, "on Nexus Prime." The guide's expression changed. Everyone knew about Nexus Prime now. It had become famous across the galaxy. "Were you there?" she asked quietly. "Yes, I was there." Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then the guide said, "I'm sorry for whoever you lost." Al blinked. He had not expected sympathy from a human. His people had been the invaders. They had tried to kill everyone on that station. "I lost many brothers," he said, "but I learned something important." "What?" Al looked at her. "I learned why your species will never be conquered. No matter how large the army, no matter how powerful the enemy, you will always fight. You will always resist. You will never stop. The guide nodded slowly. That's who we are. Yes, Al agreed. That is who you are. He looked at the painting one last time. 300 warriors against impossible odds. They had known they would die. They had stood their ground anyway. And thousands of years later, their people remembered them as heroes. Al thought about the 23 Marines who had emerged from the smoke on Nexus Prime. Wounded, exhausted, but unbroken. Walking through a defeated army with their heads held high. He understood now. He finally understood. They had never lost a war because they were the strongest. Humans won wars because they refused to accept defeat, and that was something no amount of soldiers or weapons could ever overcome. Outside the museum, the sun was setting over the human city. Al stood on the steps and watched the sky turn colors he had never seen before. This world was strange and beautiful and terrifying. But it was not his enemy, not anymore. Maybe, he thought, that was the most important lesson of all. The humans could be the most dangerous enemies in the galaxy, or they could be friends. The choice was everyone else's to make. He hoped the rest of the galaxy would choose wisely.